Hello.
Hey, Em, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am good. I'm excited for this one. I'm like jumping out of my skin a little bit for this one. So thanks for joining us on the show, Awakened Entrepreneur. A little bit of a backstory for those that are joining. We've got a few people that will join live and people watching the replay. I reached out to Emma maybe it was about a week ago. I think it was
Yeah.
about a week ago. Regarding a process that I'm going to butcher this, but it's a process of understanding the relationship between the different forces on your consciousness, the planets, and your own internal energy system, and how it relates to how you operate or how I operate specifically in business and in life. And I have to say that the initial information that you sent me is 11 audio files. I'm not sure how long each one was, probably 5 to 20 minutes for each one.
Vary.
I was blown away, like absolutely floored as to how insightful and accurate the different elements of that reading was. And I'm aware that the recordings that you had done were done like a year ago, maybe.
Some were, and others I think I did a couple for you that other people hadn't have. So of the
okay, that makes me feel special. Okay,
yeah, the hundreds of these I've done, there was a few of yours that I hadn't, other people that didn't have.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah. So like it was just incredible to just listen to those audios and the insights around those. Obviously the listeners can't hear those. So just for my benefit and also the listeners, can you just sort of give us a bit of a background on what human design is, what the gene keys are, and how the hell this sort of level of insight is even possible?
Yes. So there's lots of people these days that are into human design and the gene keys. It's kind of a thing now that it almost feels like within my industry anyway, every second person has some sort of exposure to it. However, when I began with gene keys especially, I think I knew 2 people in all of my communities that even knew what they were. So it's something that I've been exploring for a really, really long time, and something that I've brought into my own work over time because it's a living transmission. So as you know from listening to it, even though you might have had specific gene keys, which some of the audios are your specific gene keys in one of the sequences, even though other people might have the same one, they're so unique to you and your own story and your own life experience and events that have happened, that it's what I love about both the systems is no matter how skeptical people have been, because I've had such varied people that I've done readings and worked with both of these, that they kind of come in and go, oh, people are talking about it, let me just see what this is about. And not one has come away going, no, it wasn't for me, didn't fit. It's the opposite. It's this, oh my God, how do you know so much about me without knowing anything about me? So it's pretty phenomenal. So let's start at the beginning. So human design, as we all know, we always stand on the shoulders of giants. We all take from our environment, we take from things that we've learned throughout our own experiences. So Ra, when he created human design, it's a synthesis of 4 differing technologies or early sciences, I suppose you could say. So comes from the I Ching, the Chinese I Ching, which has the hexagrams and the 64 hexagrams, which very much the gene keys, the 64 gene keys is sort of taken from that concept in a lot of ways. You've also got the Hindu chakra system. Mm-hmm. So all about our centers, all of the 9 centers, we've gone from 7 to 9 over time. You've also got Western astrology. So we bring into it the planets and how we're influenced by the sun and all of those elements as well. And then you also bring in the Kabbalah, or the Tree of Life, is all within that as well. So Ra created human design, and Richard Rudd, who wrote Gene Keys, actually studied with him for many years. So he wanted to extend on the 64 gates that are in human design, but Ra didn't allow it. So he ended up going out on his own. And that's when he wrote the Gene Keys, which is the 64 gene keys influenced from the I Ching and his work within human design. And it's kind of his take or his expression and adding to those. So, but the thing with the gene keys, and this is what I love about it when people start to play in them, is they're a living transmission. So it's like this magic activates. As soon as you start to read them, they start to work within your life. And I happen to use it within business because that's one of the sequences, which I can show you later on. One of the sequences that I heavily focus on, so that people can start to match and mirror their own life experiences and how they can start to translate that into their own purpose and that inner fulfillment that we all search for.
Beautiful. So when you say Ra, I'm very familiar with channeled works, and I've had several experiences myself where I've had the direct sense of downloads. The download process, just for those that are listening, can you tell us anything that you might know about how that came about for, can't remember his name, but before he took on?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what his original name is.
Okay.
I have a lot less to do with human design, and I have a lot more to do with the gene keys.
Gene keys, okay.
So a lot of people learn human design first, and then they kind of go to the gene keys. But what's interesting is those people find that they don't like the gene keys as much because it's different. Whereas I was the opposite. I found the gene keys first, or it found me, however you want to look at it. And then I kind of went to human design more so that I could understand where the gene keys came from.
Okay.
And then I've also gone back even further to astrology, to the I Ching, to all the original sources as well. So as far as I know with Ra, though, he was, and don't quote me on this, but this is the story that I've heard, is that he basically had a great time on some of the substances, and then all of a sudden this all came through. So there's a lot of mixed things out there with human design, and I like to look at both the human design and the gene keys not as a fixed thing. I like to see it more as, I've had a lot of people come to me and say, and I see this a lot in the industry as well, and it drives me nuts, is when people hear their type, when they hear their gates, when they hear all these different elements and words that are part of it, they then just kind of fixate on that, you know, like for the authorities and strategies, for example. If you're a projector, you have to be invited, is the strategy that comes with that type. And so people then go, well, I can't do anything unless I'm invited. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. So I'm a big believer that the map is not the territory.
Yeah.
So I very much see human design and gene keys as the map and the compass, but it's not the territory. Just like if you look at a map on your phone or on an actual map piece of paper, yes, it's a map. Yes, it has everything that's on it, and it's got all these different elements that you can see. However, it's not the same as actually being in that environment, because we come with so many other intricacies of traumas that we've experienced, you know, all of the things that we've been through that make us who we are as a personality as well. You can have the same person with the exact same charts, born at the exact same time, that are completely different people.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Really important to understand that as well, I think.
Okay, so when talking about these types, these profile types, so I was I think an emotional manifesting generator. So what does that even mean for those that, for me and for the others listening?
Sure. So there's different authorities and there's different types. So an authority, so the emotional is your authority. So we also have, there's lots of different other ones. There's sacral authority. This all comes back to the sentence.
Yeah.
So, but just to speak to yours, so majority of the population are generators. And if you look at the types like a construction site or building a house, then you've got your projectors. So these are the types. Your projectors are going to be like the architect. So they're not actually designed to do a whole lot of work. They're designed to kind of create the ideas and the concepts, and then other people, usually the manifestors, the generators, and the manifesting generators, they're the ones who are going to do the physical work, right? So if we go from an actual hierarchy, let's look at it like this. So you've got your reflector is, think of him as like the guy that's in the high rise that's kind of overseeing the whole project.
Yep.
Then you've got the projector who's the architect, so he's creating what everyone else is going to actually build. Then you've got the manifestor, so their authority is to, their strategy is to inform. So the manifestor is often like the project manager, the foreman, you know, the one telling everyone else what to do and where to be. Then you've got your generators and your manifesting generators. We're the ones with the engines so that we can kind of tap into this unlimited energy all the time. And what you find with generators and manifesting generators is even if we feel tired or we don't feel like it, we can often kind of go, oh, just go anyway, go to the gym anyway, or go do that thing anyway. And we actually gain more energy and we can keep going. And what I see within business especially is everybody who doesn't know what they are a lot of the time, and I've observed this for so many years in all the communities I've been in, is everybody thinks that everyone else is the same as them.
Yeah.
Right. So what I love about using this, especially within business, is when you can understand that your type, so if I'm a generator, you're a manifesting generator. So a manifesting generator is, you're a hybrid between a generator and a manifestor. So you have traits from both, but you're put into the generator pool because you have that energy as well.
Yeah.
So we can physically go out and do the work, but unlike me, you have this ability to just inform and get people to do things. And they kind of go, oh, okay. And just kind of go do it. Where for me, if I was just to inform, it could come off a little bit pushy or a little bit bossy and that type of thing. So then when it comes to your authority, we have lots of differing ones of those as well. So you and I are both emotional. Now, the thing about emotional, again, that makes us different is we operate in waves.
Mm-hmm.
So a sacral authority, which is what majority of generators are, we have our sacral motor is defined being generators, but we have that yes, no, it gives us that yes, no authority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So again, if I'm emotional, let me give you an example. Just there's lots of differing authorities, but let me give you an example between the two. If let's say I have a business coach or a mentor who's a generator, so she's a go-go-goer, but she's got the sacral authority. So so what you'll hear them say in the marketplace is it's either a hell yes or it's a hell no.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Say yes or say no. Me as an emotional authority is if I try to emulate her, I'm actually divorcing my own authority and I'm going against my own decision making because I'm trying to take on what she's telling me because she's successful and she's achieved and whatever. But because I'm emotional, I operate in waves. So I'm never 100% certain ever about anything, right? And I need time. Doesn't mean I need a lot of time, but if you ask me something, I need to sit with it a minute. And it's only when it's something that I'm already absolute on that I can go to that yes or no. But for us, and you would understand this as I'm saying it, if it isn't yes or no for us, there's this, I don't know. And if we're forced to make a decision before we're ready, it often ends up the wrong one.
Yep.
And we'll come back and go, oh, I knew it. I knew that I shouldn't have done that. I just knew it, but I didn't listen to myself.
Yeah, that gut level reaction. It's like,
yes, yeah, absolutely. So yes, no still works for us as generators, but when it's that maybe, or it's a this isn't sitting, because generators, we use a lot of the noise. The sacral makes a lot of noise. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I have found, especially with children, is they're told to use their voice. So when you've got sacral authority children, or even just those with the sacral defined as children, a lot of us, if we're unsure of the yes, no, and then instead we start to make sounds and we'll go, I don't know, maybe, then when for babies and for young children that are coming in, I see this a lot as well, and I've told a lot of people about this, and it's made such a difference to how their children communicate, is I teach them to not stop the sound, because I work with so many clients who I'm getting them to come back into their sound because they know what their sound means, but other people might not, or other people might say, oh, that's annoying, just answer it or just say it. But for us, we need to kind of make a sound before we can come to a decision. So my 3-year-old niece, for example, she wasn't sort of speaking, or 2, I think she was at the time, she wasn't speaking very clearly, but she'd used sound for everything. And when I ran her chart, she's a sacral authority generator. So I ended up saying to my brother and his wife, and I said, you need to start teaching her, listen to her sound, and then ask her to say to her, and then allow her to add a word. Beautiful. But what we do so often is we say, no, what's the word? And we cut it out. And what we're actually doing is we're cutting off people's authority that they're trying to tune into and listen to, and they replace that with what they believe they should be saying instead. And that's where people come into trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was a little segment of one of the audios you sent me that you touched on a little bit of that. And I was just like, all of a sudden starting to catch myself throughout the next 48 hours going, like all the different noises, I would make it like just a or just the pitch and the tone and the just self-alignment with little noises. And I was just like, what the actual F? This is like, and I caught my daughter doing it a lot as well. She's 10, and before she would answer a lot of things, she'll make a noise. I'm like, man, that's so insightful.
Yeah.
So insightful. And
so so important, especially with children, to get them to, and I've got 3 boys, and what's interesting is we're all completely different types and everything. So we've got, if we include our dog, we have every type in our household. So it's been really interesting because I have to communicate and deal with each of them completely differently. And yet it works, and it brings such a beautiful harmony to who they are as people, their own confidence, and their own ability to tap into their own strategy and authority. So the authority, there's differing ones, but for us, we're both emotional. So we have that wave. So it's learning to understand your authority. And then the strategy that comes in then is we as generators and manifesting generators, we respond. So we wait to respond, being emotional generators and manifesting generators. And what that means is waiting to respond. It's a bit like if somebody was ranting and raving at us in our inbox. If we just go straight back, it's going to be heated and we're going to say something, right? Because they're going to peak our wave and they're going to send us up into this rage almost. And that's what it means to wait. That's what I like to give the example of wait to respond. Allow yourself to float back down, think about it, and then we get to respond rather than react. And that changes so much.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I imagine these types of insights for operating in business would also be very powerful, because sometimes in business we've got to make quick decisions, and there can be external pressures on decision making, and so understanding your own decision making process, I imagine, I don't imagine, I know, would be very, very powerful. So in terms of, that's the type, and again, for the people listening, there are those different types. When it comes to profile, so can you sort of explain the profile aspect of things?
Yes. So I do have if you want to share my screen.
So you can screen share. Give me 1 sec. I'll make sure you can.
And I can share with you a little diagram I've got that I use with clients.
So I've just made you co-host. So
because I know that visual makes everything so much easier, doesn't it?
Yes.
I love the visual. Being able to share it all. All right.
There's the house analogy.
What's funny about this right now is I was obviously speaking to a 5-1 last time, and I've put them in the window. So quite funny. So there's 6 lines in both human design and the gene keys. And these lines show up within our different gates as well as our differing gene keys. Now, people can have the same gene keys or gates in particular areas. It's the lines that differentiate us. So let's have a really quick look at, this is the human design lines, and I'll relate it as I speak through them as well, how they come into play with the gene keys and the lines. Awesome. And it shows us how we need each other, right? And I think that's prominent now more than ever within the world and the environment we're in. So if you think of it as a 2-story house, this is the best way. So your line ones are in human design are going to be your foundations, right? They're going to be the concrete at the bottom. They're going to be that really strong base that everything else is built on. So there's a lot of introspection, they're chameleons, there's empathy, they investigate, they're the foundation. The more they know, the less they fear. Now, in gene keys, and this is very general because as you would know, listening to your audios with all your differing lines, they're all different depending on the actual gene key, right? Yeah. But just as a general rule, the lines within gene keys is, think of the line 1 as like self. So it's just you alone, right? So when you relate the two and allow them kind of to work together, you've got this foundational piece within human design, but it's your life journey is usually going to be about you. It's your inner world, or perhaps you're even like an inventor, right? You're the person who creates the thing and then someone else takes the idea on, type thing. Mm-hmm. Then we come into the line 2, which is the hermit. So the line 2, imagine that this person is in the window here and they're painting naked with the blinds open, right? So anybody can walk past and look in the window and see into their life and their world. They kind of wear everything on their sleeve. They don't hide anything. And if you were to knock on the door, when you think of the people who can knock on your front door and then you open the door and they can see in, it's anyone, right? Anyone that knocked on your door could see into your world. So that's the line to the hermit. They like to hermit away. They like their own little space and to do their own little thing with themselves. And when it comes to gene keys, it's usually a journey about self and other. So themselves and someone else. So it's projection, a lot of people project on line twos. They're the Democrat. They're the seed that sits in the drawer for years waiting for the right time to be planted and grow, right? So they just kind of do their thing and everyone sees it. Something that a lot of people will say to a line two is, you're always changing everything you're doing. Weren't you doing this last week? Now you're doing that. Like, I can't keep up. But it's only that they let everyone see everything, right? That's why people believe that. Line three is the martyr. So imagine that line three is the staircase from the first floor to the second floor. So trial and error, mutation, adaptation, discovering what doesn't work, life bumps into them in every way and they bump into life. So think of these guys also a little bit of that inventor kind of genius, because they're the ones who are, you know, you go for a walk with them, they eat the deadly mushroom and they die from it, and the rest of us go, oh, don't eat those mushrooms, right? So they're your line threes. They're meant to make mistakes. But again, in the world that we live in, people have been told that failing is bad, failing is wrong, right? But it's kind of like the invention of the light globe. They have to try and try and try again, because we need them to, because they're the ones who show us what doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
So a line three, usually in Gene Keys, is about self and like a small group, let's say. So it's them and like a few other people. Then we go to the line four. So this is the opportunist. So now we're on the second floor, in the second floor lounge room. So when we come back to the line two, remember where people could knock on the door and they could see into that floor? There's only so many people that you invite onto the second floor. Even if you have visitors over, they'd feel really weird walking up the stairs unless they were quite close to you, right?
Yeah.
So the line four is all about, they like having people around them that they know. So now we're coming into more a community kind of vibe. So people with the line four tend to do best with referrals. They tend to do well in communities like you and I met with Black Belt.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody's in. So Black Belt would be on the second story here together.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very much that needing to be introduced to other people, because there's this element of trust. They don't like working with strangers. So when this comes into business, this is so important to know about yourself as an individual, because again, if your mentor or teacher is a line two, willing to fully express and, you know, take the clothes off and do all of this expression as their personality, then you as a line four or a five is going to go, oh my God, that is so gross. And this is where people get confused, because there's people out there saying, it's the one thing you're not doing that's holding you back from your success. You need to take your clothes off and paint naked also in order to be successful like me, right?
Yeah.
And it's so incorrect.
Yeah.
So this is what I love about using both of these, is that people get to see who they are and they get to validate it and say, all right, I can take what's golden from these people that I'm learning from, but I can also leave the rest and I can bring in my own flair and be completely confident that it's going to work for me. Because when you swap those roles around as well, the line 4, 5 or 6's way is not going to work for the 1, 2 and 3 either, right? So it's this beautiful understanding of self. So that line 4 is all about that foundation of the second floor and being introduced. And it's the community in Gene Keys. Line 5 is the heretic. So here's the little guy in the window, right? Now, what happens with the line 5, lots of people project onto them. And the reason that they do that is because they're on the second floor, but they're in the bedroom with the blinds closed. And so again, imagine who you allow into your bedroom with you. Not many people, right, that you have that close of a bond with. Maybe your best friends, your closest confidants, and maybe your children, your partner, etc. And so what a line 5 tends to do is they go into their own private world and deal with their own private things, and they don't really tell anyone about it. But then they come back outside and they share from their own experience, and they're very practical. So they'll be, for example, I went bankrupt, lost everything, nobody knew, but now I've rebuilt, now I'm a multi-billionaire, and here's how I did it, right? Whereas a line 2 is going to be the one going, oh my God, I'm about to go bankrupt. Everybody help cuddle me, so it's the complete different expression, and it works for each individual, where the 5 can totally resonate and relate, but they're the one who's going to work through it themselves. And then they're going to come out the other side and say, here's the how-to practical steps on how to get yourself out of that. Okay. And then in the gene keys, it's more about, I guess you could look at it as like a country, a culture, that type of thing. They tend to create more of a culture, more of a following, a bigger group of people that are going to be part of their thing, because they're using their own story, but they're not in the story, right? They're using it to really come out and influence and make a change. And the reason people project on them so much is because they kind of go, you didn't go through all of that. I don't believe you. Because they haven't seen that vulnerability so much that you'll see with the lower levels. Then you've got your line 6, which is the role model. And this one's sitting on the roof. And they are the optimist, the peacemaker. They're the sage. They're the one they go through 3 phases in their lives, 3 stages of how their life plays out. But they're kind of universal when you look at universal, even global, when you look at where they sit as a line in gene keys, and they see everything. They see how everyone's little minute decision impacts the greater global picture. So when you have a look at that, you can see how everybody needs each other, because we've all got such different gifts and insights and genius of how we view the world. And when it comes to our profile in human design, which is I'm a 6-2, for example.
Me as well.
So 6-2 is the 6 is first, because that's our personality. That's how people see us consciously, right? Is as this wisdom, this sage, this role model. And the older that we get, the more wise and embodied we become. And so we're the people that people will just innately call on or think of. And you're probably the same as me, where random people you haven't spoken to in 20 years will message you and say, help me with this.
Yeah.
Because you're just the person for that in their world, even if you never speak to them, right?
Yeah.
So that's very much that 6, that sage, the wisdom. And then the 2 is our unconscious. So for us, the 2 is not as out there as a personality as the 6 is, but we love to hermit away and just play in our own space, and we invite everyone in to see it, just as you're doing right now, right? This you having your own reading and your own like, oh, look at this. I'm exploring all of these things. Everybody come and look through my window and learn with me. That's the beauty of a 2. And the other beauty of the 2 is that we are able to take information and take things that are there. So you can now read human design and the gene keys and work with me on this and all that type of stuff. But you're going to get it in a way that other lines don't get it. And what you'll find then is you'll be able to then teach it well before you've even gotten really grounded into it to other people. And it's a gift that we have that other people kind of get frustrated about, because it's like, you only just heard about human design 5 minutes ago. How can you be now teaching me about it? And it's because we go down such rabbit holes.
We just get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just makes sense. Things just make sense. And the way that we embody our learning is to teach it. Right? So the more people we teach about something, the more we embody it within ourselves and the deeper we understand it. So yeah, that's very much a gift of the 6-2, is we can take wisdom and we can translate it and share it to others in a way that makes sense to them as well.
Yeah, it's very, for me, it's totally accurate. So this idea of having two lines, can you just sort of explain that again? Like so you got a dominant and then a secondary, or is it more prominent and then a shadow, or how do the two lines sort of relate in that sense?
Okay, so I'll bring it over here now. So here's your chart. And what we have within human design, so this is where the profiles come from, is from human design, not from the gene keys. So human design, you have a design side, which is about 88 days before you're born. So the belief within this is that's when they believe your soul enters the body, right? When you're an embryo. So 88 days before you're born is your design date, which is the unconscious patterning, which for you, as you can see here, is line 2, right? And then over this side, you've got your personality, which is the conscious patterns. And over here is your line 6. The sun is in your line 6. So the 6 is your personality, and the actual birth date, that's where all the transits and planets were on your actual birth date and time. This is why time needs to be accurate.
Yeah.
And then you go back to your design side, which is the 88 days before, which is your unconscious conditioning and patterns. Yeah.
Yes. So again, for people listening, obviously this particular chart is for me specifically, but again, I'd heard of this sort of process, and I've had astrological readings done in the past. But this, I don't know, like I've as a whole, and obviously we're just starting to get into it.
Mm.
Again, my mind was blown with how accurate some of this information. Well, everything that I've gone through so far, I was just like, man, this is just like ridiculous. You know, how would you explain sort of this impact of the sun's position in, you know, when your soul's entering? Like, how is that even a thing? Like,
so the belief is that the sun rays, let's just call them the sun rays, the neutrinos from the sun, carries information. So we're constantly being imprinted with information, right? But the actual time that we're born and our bodies are here on Earth is when we're basically, it's that transit time. It's where everything is in that perfect moment in time that imprints you with that information, with that conditioning, with all of these traits and this DNA blueprint, I guess you could call it, that therefore kind of drives where. Think of your body as a vehicle. What's interesting about today, I had a look at this before we jumped on, is right now, so transits are changing all the time. And the sun is moving constantly, and it's in the different gates and gene keys all the time.
Yeah.
Now, today, the sun is in gate 46. And it's line 1 today. So because we moved through the 6 lines, it's roughly 6 days. It's not quite 24 hours though. So it's roughly 6 days that you go through it. The 46 gene key is the science of luck. And so what happens is when we have our own imprinting, you've got your own things going on here, that's your own conditioning. But there's always these transits happening. So the way that I love to use all of this stuff within business and within understanding ourselves is when you start to really tune in and feel into what you're experiencing as an individual at all times, you feel there's this certain embodiment and strength and knowing when your particular gates and gene keys are in the sun. They're actually in transit right now. And especially when it hits your line. Other people might be kind of freaking out and feeling like things are a bit off and a bit different if it's something they don't have. But when they're the traits and the conditionings that we have, because we've had them for such a long time, we've become so used to how they show up for us. And so often when they land, we kind of go, oh, this feels really good. I'm not feeling like tired and overwhelmed and worn out like other people are right now. I'm actually feeling really heightened and everything feels amazing and totally magical to me right now. Now, what's interesting about the 46 gene key is it's got the shadow of seriousness, the gift of delight, and the city of ecstasy. So the story's all about the rainmaker. And it's all about how the rainmaker in the shadow of seriousness is how people send this gift outside of themselves. They have this belief that there's something outside of them. So if you think of back in the day where the farmers needed rain or they'd lose their crops and all those types of things. So they'd call in the rainmaker and he'd show up and he'd go off in a little cabin somewhere and he'd go and, pray to the gods or whatever it was. And if he was lucky, it would rain. Then everybody would see him as a god and he'd be celebrated. And then he became revered as the rainmaker, right? But it sits in the shadow of seriousness because it's all the signs of luck. And he didn't really know it was going to rain. He just knew how to read the weather patterns well enough that he would go sit in his little cabin in the hills, wait for the clouds to come, then go out, put on his little performance, and then it would rain, right? And so, but people don't have this belief that there's this inner God or this inner power that they can access. They always believe it's outside of themselves. So that's where it sits in the shadow. And this is how it works with all of our gene keys. There's 3 expressions that we have to each of them. This is why I love the gene keys. Then we go to the repressive nature is frigid. The reactive nature is frivolous within that shadow. Then we go to the 46 gift of delight. So this is about acceptance. So luck is what happens when you stop interfering with life. So what I love about right now and the 46 gift being in transit right now,
yeah,
is that people are going to start to feel like their luck's about to change. And if you step out of that victim consciousness more into that gift potential level, and you stop trying to interfere with life, you stop trying to control everything, and you instead come into this innate power that we have, that if we can find peace within ourselves, it begins to exist outside of us as well. Then we come into the 3rd expression, which is the city of ecstasy, which is the orgasmic inner world. And this would be something that I'm sure you and I have experienced, in that sense of when you have this understanding of consciousness and how you operate within the world fully, you realize that there's nothing to do. You can't control anything. There's nothing to control. All you can do is enjoy the ride, or the emotional waves for us.
Yeah.
And magic is what happens when we start to create this beautiful inner peace and calm. We nourish our bodies. We nourish how we feel about ourselves. We start to negate the negative thoughts and we start to talk to ourselves better, all of those elements. Then we start to treat our partners and our children in the same way. We start to treat our clients, and it ripples out and ripples out. And before you know it, people are just finding you and asking to work with you. And you're not advertising and you're not posting all over Facebook and you're not doing all of these things. It's just this magical transmission starts to happen and you become magnetic to it instead. Yeah. And so that's what's happening right now. And the sun is in 46 at the moment. And so people are going to start to see a shift, and it all depends on what expression you're choosing to sit within as to how that shows up for you. And so when you've got your own conditioned ones, this is what I've seen within myself and many of my clients, is you could still have a really rough time if you're sitting in the shadow of each of them and in that victim collective consciousness of them and believing everything that you're seeing and hearing outside of you and putting all of the eggs in that basket and going, someone else is going to rescue me, someone else is going to fix this. But when you can bring it into yourself and you can rise that consciousness up, that's what makes all the difference. And suddenly these crazy little synchronicities start to happen. And so going back to the rainmaker, the people in the shadow called on him, but he was actually just having a really great time, and he was just had that synchronicity with the weather and with what he knew was happening outside of him. And so when he wanted it to rain, it rained, because he knew how to read what was going on, right? Because he was so in tune. So it's the science of luck, but in this crazy magical way, you can actually become in control of the uncontrollable, right?
Yeah.
So that in a nutshell is really around how all of your own conditioning works. You're going to find your own levels of genius in each of them, because you've unconsciously and consciously been playing in them your entire life. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I have a copy of the chart that you brought up. I've just got it on another screen here.
Yeah.
And again, sort of looking at this concept of this innate design and my personality, there are some that are colored in, and there are some that are open. Can you sort of explain if there's any significance to that, or what the meaning of that is?
Mm-hmm.
So some are sort of more formed and some are more open.
Sure. So these are your 9 centers. So we all have those. Now, the differing types are going to look different. So a reflector, for example, they're all white or open, we call it. But reflectors are a little bit unique and special, because reflectors don't have any conditioned centers and defined centers. Mm-hmm. And so they actually act like Teflon. Because if you imagine them all as little mirrors, and where we're open, so the white ones, we're going to mirror back and amplify somebody whose is defined if we're with them. And that's why I say to some people, that's why sometimes if it's kind of, you're trying to sort of decipher energies, and we all go through different stages with this, sometimes you'll be around certain people and be like, oh, that just wasn't me. It's just not myself, but I tend to be drawn to do things with that person that I wouldn't normally do, or I don't have the energy to do when they're not there. Another thing that we have to be aware of as generators, see, we've got here, this is the sacral point, right? Now, emotional authority is number 1, always number 1. So it's the most powerful, and then we come sort of down the chart. So we have the emotional authority. So we're actually quite powerful. And this is where I have learnt that it makes a massive difference how I'm operating internally. I do Kundalini yoga and that sort of thing daily, because I need to control my emotions, my waves, right? Because the theme for us, if we're out of sync, is frustration and anger, right? That's a really dangerous thing. Now, you imagine not only someone operating from a shadow frequency, but doing it from anger. That's a dangerous weapon, right? That can really harm people. So we need to always be keeping satisfaction. Now, again, different types have different themes, but we need to be keeping satisfaction as our prime goal. I need to feel satisfied. I need to feel satisfied. What is it I can shift about this that's going to bring me back into just feeling satisfied and content right now, okay? So again, this is where that wave, if it goes up and we come into frustration or anger, it's like, don't respond with that energy. Wait till you can bring yourself back and you're satisfied with what you're going to say or do next, right? So because these ones here for you are defined, so these are yours that are, I guess you can say, conditioned. These are your ways that you operate. And so if somebody has an open authority, theirs is white with the emotional, for example, when you're with them, they're going to take on your emotion and they're going to reflect it back to you. And I have a son he has an open emotional, and his 2 brothers and I are all emotional. So he's literally a
He's
hermit
copping
in
it.
his room.
Yeah.
And he's like, just leave me alone, because he actually needs time, because he's a projector. So he needs time to disperse our energy, right? So if he starts to get angry, because bitterness is his not self theme, he starts to get bitter, or he wants to take on one of his brothers or something like that, it's like, okay, dude, you need to just go away. All right. It's not about behave, control the anger. It's none of that. It's like, go somewhere else, do something else. You need to get rid of this emotion, because he's got 3 of us who have our own emotions. So we're always know how we feel, right? But then we've also got to understand that we're projecting that, we're pushing that onto other people as well. So they can come away from time with us and feel really exhausted if we're in a bad mood. And I know for myself personally, especially as a woman being more cyclic, when hormones start to drop and shift, I deliberately start saying no to even socializing, because I know the effect and the impact I can have on people if I'm just not feeling great, and I just need to have time out and not feel great.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about forcing yourself to feel good all the time, because it's impossible, but it's about understanding yourself so that you can show up when you're at your best. So this one here is the root. So again, this is a very powerful motor that keeps us going. So people without this are going to feel like they're almost forcing themselves to kind of finish things, where again, us with that and the sacral, we tend to just be able to go and go and go with it. All right. So again, we've got to be mindful that other people don't have that. Now, you've got an open spleen, which again, we're still intuitive, because you've still got channels here that are defined, still got that beautiful intuition that comes from that splenic center. But again, when we're around people with that defined, we're going to take that on so much more. And we're going to find that when we're with them, we can really sort of communicate that in a lot more ways also. We've also got the G center defined. So this is very much our direction, our love of body, of our physical self, that type of thing. So again, people will magnetically be drawn to those with the G center defined for that direction and clarity that's going on. You've got an open heart. So again, if you're around people that have this defined ego center, the heart-driven people can be very motivated. It's like, I'm not giving up. They're very competitive. They're very like, look at me, look how amazing I am. Like, it's that real dominant kind of driver that happens. So again, if you're around someone who's more ego defined, we can find ourselves kind of playing that role as well in a lot of ways. You've got the defined throat. So again, you can influence others that don't have that. And then you've got the open mind and ajna. So this is where we've just got to be mindful of, the thoughts that are coming through, and really starting to be clear on what's yours and what isn't. And the overthinking can be a bit of an issue there sometimes as well, because we're open. So people with the defined can almost implant thoughts. So what I've found from my own experience is being around people who have these defined, especially the mind, they can think something and transfer that to me and make me think I thought it. So it's a really tricky one that, again, you've got to be mindful of what's open and what's not, and what those drivers are, so that you can start to kind of differentiate what's yours and what's others. And I work with so many people who often say that this isn't mine. They'll be going through a feeling or something happening and going, this doesn't feel like it's mine. Yeah. I'm feeling like I'm getting this from someone else. So yeah, it's always a great idea that people make sure they have time out. Whatever type you are, some more so than others, but whatever type you are, I'm a big believer in having time out, just to really tune in to who you are and how you operate and how you're feeling and what's true for you in the moment. so that you can get the clarity and not be influenced by people that are maybe within your environment all the time.
That's awesome.
Mm.
So in terms of and we're almost at the hour, and I'm obviously mindful of your time. The profile covered, briefly, some aspects of like genius, love, and prosperity. With I think it was like my life's work, my evolution, my radiance, and my purpose. There's no way we're going to cover all of those in 5 minutes, but yeah, maybe if you could just sort of explain sort of some of those dynamics. I don't know how you can do that in 5 minutes, but
watch me.
I will.
Okay, so with the gene keys, we've got the 3 sequences. So you've got you start at the life's work, and this is the genius, right? So we go from life's work through to evolution, to radiance, down to purpose. So they're the first that, if you were to study the gene keys in full, they're the first ones that you would go deep into. And the lines then are going to be different as a life's work than they are as the brand, or, if they double up as a different gene key, which I'll talk about in a sec.
Yep.
So life's work, evolution, radiance, and purpose. That's the first step. That's the opening of your genius. Then we come into relationships, or the love and the Venus sequence. So here we have, this one doubles up as step 1. Then we move into attraction, IQ, EQ, SQ, and then the core wound is actually what this one shows up as. So this is, again, going to go back to like your astrology, the different times of your life, like different things that you're going to experience at different ages as well, and how that storyline really kind of works. What's beautiful about this section is the core wound. So this is where when you're in the embryo, right? This gene key is taken from. So when you're in the embryo, you are imprinted with this core wound as to what it is that you're actually here to do. And so what's beautiful when it transforms into the prosperity or the pearl sequence is it becomes your vocation. So the core wound, the one thing that you're actually here to help heal within the conscious collective, becomes your vocation. And it's not so much about what's the job, it's not like you're meant to become a vet and you're meant to become a midwife and you're meant to become a doctor. It's not so much about that. It's more about who you're being within that moment. And so then the vocation moves into the culture, the life's work transforms into brand, and then we come back to the pearl. So the pearl, or the prosperity key, actually becomes like the holy grail, or the embryo of your entire life. So while everything else is being played out, this beautiful prosperity key has been creating itself from all the events and experiences that you've had. And then you're left with, this is the thing that is going to bring all of it into fruition and make your journey here on earth worthwhile.
Wow.
How's that?
That's pretty powerful. I think looking, I'm going to have so many questions. Looking at this process, if someone wants to, because this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we've discussed, and some of what you've shared with me is general, and obviously some is specific from my specific chart. Yeah. If someone is curious about getting a reading with you, how would they go about contacting you and starting this process? Because already, again, we're really just scratching the surface, but between the audios and a few things that you've already said today, and we're, again, haven't really gone too far into it, there's some just really beautiful, powerful insights into affirming dynamics within myself and what I've felt is like my life's calling. It's powerful. And so if someone were looking to get some insights into getting a reading with you, how would they go about that? What's the best way to contact you?
So I can give you my little Linktree link if you like as well. So I only do so many readings a month because obviously they take a bit of time. So I sort of fit them in around everything else. So more than welcome to reach out about those. And I've also got my course creator program, which is where it's kind of a deep dive into how they can go through and teach themselves all these sort of general practices around human design and the gene keys. Then they can build their programs or restructure their businesses and courses based off that is another option. And then I do one-to-one work around that as well. So they sort of become a customized thing that I do with people. Yeah,
like already I can see like the scope for this and obviously working around this dynamic, be a huge advantage to be able to work with you one-on-one in redesigning, whether it be your business or, all sorts of different dynamics. I can already see how powerful it is. So again, for those listening, highly encourage you to reach out to Emma and start that process. So this has been awesome. That's gone so quick.
It has, hasn't it?
It's gone very, very quick. And I still have so many questions, but
we can cover, because that's the great thing about, because we do the 90-minute consult for your individual gene keys and human design. It's so unique to each person, and also what you're coming to have a reading for is so different for so many different people, that even though it's about business, everybody's businesses are different, and what your goals are and what you want to achieve and what you really want to draw out of knowing the human design and the gene keys for is so unique as well. So yeah, it's great to be able to go deep into that with each person.
Well, I'm excited to go further into it, but thank you so much for your time and again sharing this. It's just mind-blowing. It really is mind-blowing. And I understand this sort of thing is obviously may or may not be for everybody, but already just the experience, my recommendation would be just to suspend your logical, fear-based, analysis of this type of dynamic, because until you actually have the reading and then you see how specifically, like how accurately, for me at least, I can't speak for everybody, but for me it's been stupidly insightful and accurate, that I would highly recommend that they connect with you. So thank you so much for your time today. And again, the people watching this as a replay, please reach out to Em if you feel you have more questions, because obviously she's the one to ask as to how this could possibly help you. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
And I look forward to doing a lot more study into this, because this is deeply fascinating, and I'm excited about the other insights that I'll get through the process. So thank you.
Awesome. Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.